Never in your life would you expect this. Men dressed like officials knocking on your door, holding clipboards, flashing badges, telling you that you need to get out of your own home. No judge, no court papers, no sheriff. Just fake power backed by intimidation. That's exactly what one man faced. He thought he was about to lose everything. But what those fake HOA cops didn't know was that 6 Navy SEALs were about to roll up and change the entire story. And trust me, the way it ended, you won't believe it. Let me ask you something. What would you do if somebody came to your front porch, said they had the right to kick you out, and demanded you hand over your keys right then and there? Would you fight back? Would you call the cops? Would you freeze? Now picture this. You're a black man in a neighborhood where you already feel like you stick out. You're watched more than your neighbors. Every move feels like it gets judged. And then suddenly, a group of strangers shows up pretending they're part of the HOA, talking down to you, trying to scare you off your own property. That's not just a bad dream. That's what happened to Marcus. And today, we're going to walk through his story. How he worked his whole life to buy that house. How fake HOA cops tried to push him out. How 6 Navy SEALs showed up at just the right time. And what this story really says about power, race, and what it means to stand your ground. Stick around, because this story will take you from anger to shock, to pure satisfaction when the tables turn. Marcus grew up in the South. His mom raised him alone, working 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. From a young age, Marcus understood what it meant to struggle, but also what it meant to fight. He wasn't the kind of guy who expected handouts. Everything he had, he earned. He worked through college, then got a steady job in it. It wasn't glamorous, but it was enough to keep him moving forward. He saved, he sacrificed, and after years of grinding, he finally bought his dream, a modest home in a nice neighborhood. Now, this wasn't a mansion. It wasn't luxury. It was just a normal 2-story home with a yard where he could plant flowers for his mom and a porch where he could drink coffee before work. For Marcus, that house wasn't just 4 walls. It was proof that he had made it through all the struggles that tried to hold him back. But here, where things started to get complicated. The neighborhood had a homeowners association, an HOA, and if you've ever dealt with one, you know how they operate. They claim they're there to keep the community nice, but sometimes they go way too far. Letters in the mail about your lawn, notes on your door about parking, fines for leaving your trash out a day too long. Some HOAs are harmless, but some, they're like mini governments with no real checks and balances. And in Marcus's neighborhood, the HOA was known for being strict, petty strict. People whispered about certain board members who acted like dictators. It was the kind of place where a misplaced flower pot could spark a letter and a $100 fine. Now imagine being one of the few black homeowners in that neighborhood. Every small thing Marcus did, leaving his grill in the driveway, trimming his bushes late, even playing music on his porch, seemed to get extra attention. Letters piled up. Neighbors gave him looks. And deep down, Marcus knew what was going on. He didn't just stand out because of his lawn. He stood out because of who he was. And then came the day that would test everything. It was a Saturday morning when Marcus heard the knock on his door. He wasn't expecting anyone. When he opened it, he saw 3 men standing there. They looked official at first glance. Polo shirts with patches, cheap metal badges clipped to their belts, clipboards stacked with papers. They didn't waste time. One of them spoke first. "Mr. Johnson, you need to vacate this property immediately. The HOA has ruled you're in violation. This home is no longer yours." Marcus froze. "What are you talking about? I pay my mortgage. This is my house." The man didn't blink. He just shoved the clipboard closer. "The HOA board voted. You've been warned multiple times. You're being evicted. You have until the end of the day to clear out." Think about that for a second. Imagine somebody showing up at your home, talking like they have the right to erase your life with a single vote. No sheriff, no judge, just fake power. Marcus knew something wasn't right, but fear started creeping in. These men looked like they had authority, they spoke like it, and for a moment Marcus wondered if somehow this could be real. And here, where the danger lies, impersonation. All it takes is a badge, a clipboard, and confidence, and most people will fold. That's how scams work. That's how people lose homes, money, and even their safety. But Marcus wasn't about to roll over. He pushed back. You're not real cops. You're not the HOA board. Where's the paperwork from the court? Where's the sheriff? That's when the men got aggressive. Their tone changed. They leaned in, voices sharp. One of them said, "If you don't leave, we'll make sure the police remove you. Don't test us." At that moment, Marcus felt the weight of being alone. Alone against three men pretending to be bigger than they were. And as a black man, he knew the stakes. If he called the cops, would they believe him, or the men on his porch? But what none of them knew was that help was already on the way. Because just down the street, 6 Navy SEALs, neighbors, friends, trained protectors, had noticed the scene unfolding. And if you think that was wild, wait until you hear how they handled it. The SEALs didn't storm in like a movie. They didn't shout or draw weapons. They didn't need to. Instead, they walked up calmly, their presence speaking louder than words. 6 men, strong, confident, disciplined. You could feel the shift in the air. One of them asked the imposters a simple question. Who gave you the authority to evict this man? The fake cops tried to keep their act going. They waved the clipboards, mumbled about the HOA vote, and acted like Marcus was in the wrong. But the SEALs weren't buying it. Another one asked, "Where?" the court order. "Where's the sheriff? You can't evict a man from his home without legal documents, so let's see them." Silence. The imposters shuffled their papers, but nothing they had looked real. And the longer the SEALs pressed, the weaker their story became. It wasn't just what the SEALs said, it was how they said it. Calm, firm, like men who'd faced real danger and knew fake authority when they saw it. Finally, one SEAL leaned in and said, "Here's the truth. You're impersonating officials. That's a crime. So either you walk away now or we call the real cops, and you explain why you're standing here trying to steal a man's home." Yep. That was it. The imposters cracked. Their confidence drained, and one by one they backed off the porch. No more tough talk, no more fake authority, just retreat. Marcus stood there in shock. Relief washed over him, but so did anger. He almost lost his home. He almost let fear take control. And it was only because those SEALs stepped in that the truth came out. The dust from that Saturday confrontation had barely settled when Marcus realized something terrifying. The fight wasn't over. Yes, the imposters backed off. Yes, the SEALs stood tall by his side. But intimidation doesn't vanish overnight. It lingers. It waits. And sometimes it comes back stronger. Because here's the truth. When people feel power slipping away, they don't always retreat quietly. Sometimes they double down. And that's exactly what happened next. Marcus woke up early Sunday morning, thinking maybe, just maybe, he could breathe again. The air felt lighter, but his mind was still racing. He kept replaying the moment those fake HOA cops stood on his porch, the way they said the house wasn't his, the way his stomach dropped when they shoved that fake paperwork in his face. He poured himself coffee, sat on the porch, and tried to enjoy the quiet. But then he noticed something strange. 2 cars he didn't recognize were parked down the street. Not right in front of his house, but close enough to see, close enough to watch. The windows were tinted, the engines off. He couldn't see who was inside, but he could feel the eyes. His first thought, they're back. You ever feel like you're being watched? That gnawing feeling in the back of your head, that's what Marcus felt all day. Every time he stepped outside, the cars were there. Every time he looked out the window, he saw shadows shifting inside. They never approached, they just sat there. And the worst part, Marcus didn't know if he was overreacting or if the danger was real. That's what intimidation does. It gets inside your head until you start questioning your own sanity. He texted one of the SEALs, John, the guy who had spoken up the most the day before. "Hey man, I think they're watching me again." Within 15 minutes, John and 2 other SEALs were at his house. They didn't say much. They just stood on the porch with him, arms crossed, watching the cars down the street. And guess what? After about an hour, the cars finally drove off. Coincidence? Maybe, but Marcus knew better. That week, Marcus got a letter in the mail, official HOA letterhead. It said there would be a special board meeting to discuss community issues. And guess whose name was on the agenda? Marcus Johnson. Now tell me this. What are the odds? Fake HOA cops show up to kick him out one weekend, and by the next, the board suddenly has a meeting with his name on it. Marcus didn't want to go, he didn't trust them, but John insisted. You need to face them, and you won't be going alone. So Marcus walked into that meeting with 3 Navy SEALs at his side. Imagine the looks on those board members' faces. They thought Marcus would come alone, scared, maybe even ready to apologize. Instead, he walked in strong. The board started asking loaded questions. Why have there been so many complaints about your property? Are you keeping up with community standards? Do you feel like this is the right neighborhood for you? That last one cut deep. Marcus knew what they meant. It wasn't about grass length or trash cans. It was about him, his skin, his presence. But here's the kicker. Marcus didn't have to say much. The SEALs did the talking. They reminded the board that impersonating officials was a crime. They asked why Marcus's name had been singled out. They asked what protections were in place for homeowners against harassment. And you know what happened? The board folded. They stammered. They backtracked. They said things like miscommunication and clerical errors. But Marcus knew. He saw through the lies. 2 days later, the police finally showed up, but not to arrest the fake HOA cops. No, they showed up at Marcus's door, responding to noise complaints and disturbances. At least that's what they said. Marcus stood there, heart pounding, because in his mind he saw the trap. If he got angry, if he raised his voice, they'd have an excuse to escalate. If he stayed quiet, he looked guilty. That's the reality for black men in America. You don't just deal with the problem. You deal with how people will perceive you dealing with the problem. Luckily, 2 SEALs happened to be inside his house at the time. They stepped out with him, calm and professional, and handled the officers directly. Is there a complaint on record? Who filed it? Do you have proof? And just like that, the police didn't have much to say. They mumbled, scribbled notes, and left. But Marcus knew this was no accident. The HOA, or whoever was behind the fake cops, wasn't finished. By the end of that week, Marcus was exhausted. He couldn't sleep. Every car that slowed near his house made him jump. Every knock at the door sent chills down his spine. He told John, "Man, I feel like they're trying to break me. Not just take the house, but break me as a person." And John looked him in the eye and said, "That's exactly what they're trying to do, but they picked the wrong man." One Friday night, Marcus was driving home from work when he noticed headlights following him. He changed lanes. The car changed lanes. He turned. The car turned. By the time he pulled into his driveway, the car slowed down, then parked 2 houses down. Same tinted windows, same feeling of being watched. Marcus snapped. He wasn't going to let fear run his life anymore. He called the SEALs, not to hide but to plan. The next morning, they sat around his kitchen table, laying out everything that had happened. The fake eviction. The cars parked outside. The board meeting. The police showing up. The car that followed him. And that's when John said something that changed the game. "Marcus, this isn't random. This is organized. Somebody wants you out of here, and they're not going to stop until you stand up and expose them." That night, Marcus made a decision. He wasn't just going to defend himself. He was going to fight back. He started gathering evidence, photos of the cars, copies of the letters, recordings of conversations. He was building a case. Because if the system was going to play dirty, he was going to shine a light on it. But here's the part you won't believe. When Marcus finally confronted the truth about who was behind all of this, the fake HOA cops, the intimidation, the harassment, it wasn't just random neighbors. It was someone much closer to home. And the moment he found out, everything changed. And if you thought part 1 was wild, part 2 is going to leave you speechless.